The universe was created in 6 consecutive days. When you add up the time frame, it's only a few thousand years ago.
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, so let's build a chronology of world history. It's about 1,649 years between Adam and Noah's flood. The real dark ages was in the years after the flood. As people spread out on the earth, this is when we see the lifespans drop really rapidly. So all the other ancient history we talk about has to be fit into about a 500-year window.
Like in the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Has to take place within the 500 years of Noah to Abraham?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe 1,000 years.
Remember when I said at the beginning of this episode, it's really hard to
Yes.
react at live time because somebody just drops a bomb on you? This is like me in real time right now.
There's so much more. It's a lifetime of study. That's what's in front of you.
Hello. Welcome to Biblically Speaking. My name is Cassian Bellino, and I'm your host. In this podcast, we talk about the Bible in simple terms with experts, PhDs, and scholarly theologians to make understanding God easier. These conversations have transformed my relationship with Christ and understanding of religion. Now, I'm sharing these recorded conversations with you. On this podcast, we talk about the facts, the history, and the translations to make the Bible make sense, so we can get to know God, our Creator, better.
Hello. My name is Cassian Bellino, and I'm your host for Biblically Speaking. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Robert Carter join me today for the podcast. You are a geneticist, a marine biologist, and a researcher with Creation Ministries International. I found you through Is Genesis History, that documentary on Amazon, which really I watched at the beginning of me starting this entire endeavor to pursue the Bible through scholars. So this is extremely exciting for me to have you on the show. One of the main things I wanted to bring you on the show, Dr. Carter, is to discuss how does the biblical timeline align, intersect, contradict the scientific global timeline that we know today and we're raised with in school? And how can we reconcile both of these as Christians and align those?
There's two ways to approach our version of history, what we think about history. One is the predominant strain in academia today. It's called naturalism. Naturalism is a philosophy, a belief that natural processes and forces can be used to explain everything that's ever happened in the history of the universe. That's where we get the Big Bang Theory. That's where we get naturalistic origin of life theories. That's where we get evolution. Notice there's no miracles. There's no outside forces. There's no God. Whether or not God exists is irrelevant. Maybe God started the Big Bang or something. But it cuts out any biblical approach to understanding history. I'm not a naturalist. It doesn't mean, I don't understand evolution. I just don't agree with your assumption that everything that's ever happened ever can be explained by natural forces. And if there's a God, naturalism's not true. If God is a God of order and a God of law and a God of complexity, well, he doesn't ever do anything against his own nature. If that kind of a God created the universe, it would operate according to law. It would behave naturalistically once it's created.
Okay.
So naturalism had a good run of it for about 200 years. And now in the modern time, we have biological complexity, which we didn't understand 100 years ago. And the more complex life is, the less probable it is that naturalism can explain it.
Wow, that is a really good apologetics. That's some good stuff right there.
When you read the first page of the Bible, the days of creation, it's as if when God set up that order of events, he did it to thwart naturalistic explanations. Because you can't have plants on day 3 millions of years before you have the sun on day 4. You can't have birds and bats, the flying things, on day 5 before you have land animals on day 6. Because evolution says those things evolved from land animals.
Yeah.
But God put the flying things before the land things. So, I struggle with this. I try to add evolution and millions of years and deep time to that passage every way you can imagine.
Yeah.
Because, if you want to write in Hebrew 6 consecutive days, you'd write it like Genesis 1 reads. And that's the problem. And that's why theologians argue about this and people struggle with this. I know most theologians disagree with me, and I'm fine with that. But the tenor of the text really does read like the universe was created in 6 consecutive days. When you add up the time frame, it's only a few thousand years ago. Time frame. You have to decide if there's a God, right? Naturalism isn't true. But you have to decide where God acts. Did he start off the Big Bang billions of years ago and let go? Did he maybe do a Big Bang and then create the solar system and the planet and then maybe put bacteria on it and let evolution happen? Or did he do that and then millions of years later created trilobites, and millions of years later created dinosaurs, and millions of years later created Homo sapiens? Or did he just create it? That's the hard choice. That's what Christian has to struggle with and fight with. And honestly, if we choose to read the Bible as it kind of reads, it's embarrassing because the world laughs at us.
Yeah.
But if we believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that's laughable. If we believe he didn't actually have a father, human father, that's ridiculous. If Jesus said, "Oh, I'm going to come back from the dead in 3 days," and then he did, to believe that means you're a kook.
Yeah.
So we already kooked.
You can't take the whole thing.
Yeah, might as well take the whole thing. They're all going to laugh at us.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead and let's just jump into the timeline. So how would you reconcile what that timeline would be? Because like old Earth would be billions of years old. They somehow fit in, the days of creation with the dinosaurs, with evolution. But young Earth is saying this happened in 7 days. And then from there, history began. But for me, again, like this is where then history class comes into play. I want to take a moment to highlight the platform that's revolutionizing the way that people learn about the Word of God, school. When I first started this podcast, my goal was very simple. I wanted to equip people with clear, accessible, biblical understanding through scholars. But I quickly realized that podcasting alone wasn't enough. I wanted to create a space where people could actually connect and learn and dive deeper beyond just listening. That's when I found School. School is the most user-friendly platform I've ever come across. It's built by Sam Ovens with insights from business minds like Alex Hermosi. School combines the best of online education, coaching, and community in one place. It's intuitive, powerful, and it connects you to a global network of learners and teachers. That's why I launched Biblically Heard, a place where you can chat with scholars, take courses from beginner to expert level, and even connect with me directly. So if you're looking to build a coaching business or launch an online course or create an engaged community, School beats out every other tool. It combines the best of Patreon-style tiered services and Telegram-style community feeds. It's a seamless scheduling tool with integrations with Zapier, Zoom, and even Google Calendar. If this sounds like the right platform for you, please use my affiliate link in the show notes below to get started. It won't cost you anything extra, and it keeps this channel going. Now, back to the show. Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, so let's build a chronology of world history. And then from that chronology, the rest of the conversation, we can reference back to that.
Okay, perfect.
So we need a basic framework of understanding and basic time spans, not super detailed, but let's just, God creates the universe in 6 consecutive days, rests on the 7th day. How long ago was that? Well, if you're going to figure it out biblically, the only time statements we have are the lifespans of Adam, Seth, and their descendants up to Noah. And so Adam lived 130 years and Seth was born. Okay, 130 years plus or minus probably 6 months. That's not an exact time statement. Seth is not born on Adam's birthday.
Got it.
We have
Got it.
10 generations between Adam and Noah. And if you add up all those times, it's about 1,649 years between Adam and Noah's flood when Noah was 600 years old.
It's like 1,600 years until Noah.
Genesis chapter 5 stops with Noah. It's a genealogy of Adam to Noah, and that's it. That's the first big bite of chronology we have in the Bible. Did Adam understand that the year is 365.25 days long? I bet it took him a while to figure that out. In fact, I'm guessing the first calendar was lunar.
Yeah.
Because who cares what a year is? The only reason you need to know...
How does that change things?
Well, if, let's say, the original count was in months and someone later on converted it into years, there's going to be a rounding error.
Yeah.
It's not an error, it's not a mistake, but there's a rounding issue. Or what if, like the Sumerians, they like the number 12 and 60? What if Adam was counting in groups of 60 months? Which is approximately 5 years. And if you converted groups of 60 months into 5 years, all your ages would end in 0 or 5. Just like all the ages in Genesis 5 end in a 0 or 5.
Oh boy.
So it's not, the numbers are odd. The numbers are not random. There's something about these numbers that we have to deal with, and there's something mathematical happening, and I think it's a calendar convention.
Okay. So if we go from the 365 to the calendar that's grouped by 5 years,
Yep.
how does that 1600 year span affect?
It doesn't. It's just
Oh, it stays the same.
it's just most of the ages are rounded off to 0 or 5.
Got it.
But if I'm 510 years old, do I really care if I'm 511?
Got it.
512, 500. Oh, now 515. Okay, whatever. They might have been counting in 5s because it didn't matter.
It does. Okay.
There's possibilities.
I feel like there are like these giant gaps of like how old the Egyptians are and like, all the Chinese dynasties that like it's hard to fit those into what the biblical timeline is.
But specifically for the Chinese dynasties, the earliest dynasties, this mythical period of 5 rulers that's very long. It's not real history.
What do you mean?
It's not solid like, Emperor Chao reigned from here to here, and he had 32 years, and his son became this. It's the mystical period.
I'm about to say, it sounds like a mythology of just like this was the time of our forefathers, and we don't have hard dates.
Yes,
like they existed, they laid the groundwork for what we know today.
Yes, but the first Chinese dynasty itself was founded a few decades after the Tower of Babel. If we just take their dates and our dates and line them up, they fit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's get back to that with the secular timeline. So now we're at Noah's Ark.
We're at
Noah's flood.
So we don't have any human history as we know it has not yet happened. This is the antediluvian, before the flood, the antediluvian era. Noah is 600 years old when the flood starts. They're on the ark for about a year. And then in Genesis 11, we have a list of Noah's son Shem and his son Arphaxad going through Eber and through Terah, all the way to Abraham. So we have another 10 generations. This is when we see the lifespans drop really rapidly, but very biologically also.
What is causing that decay?
I suspect multiple things. One is a change in diet. We know that vegetarians live longer than meat eaters. Now, I eat meat. I like meat, but it is true that a vegetarian lifestyle is healthier than eating meat. We also have a problem of inbreeding. Shem, Ham, and Japheth are brothers. They're the founders of the whole human race. Their 3 wives, they could have been sisters.
Yeah. But wouldn't that have been the same exact thing with Adam?
Yes, except Adam wouldn't have had any mutations. If God created Adam, God didn't create Adam with bad stuff in his body. It was over thousands of years mutations build up. Today, it's really bad idea to marry your cousin. In Adam's day, that would have been 0 problem. In Noah's day, there would have been probably less of a problem, but look what happens. The lifespans.
1,600 years of mutations.
Yeah. Plus the inbreeding.
But historically speaking, that would still cause issues then, as it would still cause issues today.
We do see issues, though, in Abraham's time. He married his half-sister, Sarah. They couldn't get pregnant. It took a miraculous intervention of God for her to have a child.
Oh, that's a really good point. Running my own podcast, I'm always moving too fast. I'm finding guests, I'm editing episodes, I'm creating reels, or guesting on other shows. Not to mention, I just live in a world that moves fast. Notifications, trends, endless to-do lists. You know what feels like a blessing in all that? Slowing down. I'd love nothing more than a moment to pause, be present, and choose something timeless. That's exactly what Dwell Label is all about. When I first discovered Dwell Label, it wasn't just about the clothes. It was about a mindset. Thoughtful, intentional fashion that doesn't scream for attention, but instead invites you to slow down. Their pieces are modern takes on classic styles, made to last, not just for the season, but for years. I love that I can throw on a Dwell Label outfit for editing in a coffee shop, with Bible studies, or looking professional in an interview. It always feels right. Comfortable, effortless, elevated. And here's the best part. Dwell Label does not just talk about rest. They live it. Their website literally doesn't work on Sundays because they believe in pausing and dwelling on what matters most. So if you're looking for high quality, timeless fashion that aligns with a lifestyle of intention and presence, I can't recommend Dwell Label enough. Shop Dwell Label with the link in the show notes and use my code BIBSPEAK15, BIBSPEAK15 for an exclusive discount at checkout. Take a breath, slow down, and dwell in the good things. Now, back to the show.
When Esau is born, he's hairy all over. He probably had the hypertrichosis gene or the Wolfman gene. He was noticeably hairy. He's covered in hair. And then we had Leah. Leah had weak eyes. I don't know what that means. It might have been she's not good looking, or maybe it's her eyes have a problem. But that's right there in the same context.
Yeah,
It's an idiom. We don't know what the idiom means. She had weak
wow.
eyes. Was she half blind? Was she blind? Or was she ugly? I don't know.
Yeah, like a lazy eye, like whatever it could have been. Like, wow, that is phenomenal.
And I'm suggesting,
Okay.
all right, I'm just suggesting that might be a genetic thing.
It makes sense.
Like
It's
later on in Dave, when Dave was an older person, all the so-called sons of the giant, which should be Goliath, are getting killed off one by one in battle. And one of them had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. He had polydactyly, a common sign of inbreeding.
Gosh, this is so cool that we're talking.
Okay.
This is so cool. Okay. So we're at Noah. There's inbreeding. The ages are dropping off.
Okay.
How do we reconcile with that with kind of the rest of the timelines?
Well, if you add up all the time between Shem and Terah, Abraham's father, you get another several thousand years. And then by the time you get to Abraham, we're about 2000 BC. So all the other ancient history we talk about has to be fit into about a 500-year window.
All the other history we talk about, like in the rest of the world, has to take place within the 500 years of Noah to Abraham?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe 1,000 years. The time frame of Abraham is about 500 years after the flood. And he's probably, I'm going to call him Chalcolithic, the Copper Age.
Got it.
That the evolutionists would put way before him. But I'm looking at the technologies the Bible's describing in the Bible. It's pretty primitive technologies. Later on, Solomon is building these giant bronze bulls and this giant bowl of bronze. And, well, that's the Iron Age, actually. It's not even in the Bronze Age anymore.
So once we get to Abraham, where are we at when it's like the Egyptians, with like the Romans, with the Greeks, what's going on in Africa, what's going on in China? Like, what's going on?
Lots of things all over the world. The real dark ages was in the years after the flood, as people spread out on the earth before civilizations were invented, before writing came about. For most of the earth, we have pretty much no records, actually, for the early settlement periods. All we have is, pots and bones and graves. We don't have any historical records. We don't
That's
have.
why the Dead Sea Scrolls were such a fascinating find.
Yes, but those are another 2,000 years later after Abraham, and we know, like, for Egyptian history, the most important person in this is a guy named Manetho, who was a Ptolemaic scholar. He post-dated Alexander the Great. So his general Ptolemy, who took over Egypt, wanted to legitimize his reign as a descendant of the pharaoh. So he hires this guy to basically manipulate the record, and he chains all these pharaohs together, all these different dynasties, many of which were contemporaneous.
What does that mean?
It happened at the same time, because Egypt wasn't always unified. There's times that Egypt was broken up into little petty kingdoms, but he chains them together end to end, and that artificially extends Egyptian history.
And why did they want to do that? Just to make the reign seem super long and powerful? Like, what's the move there?
His competitor was Berosus, who was working for the Seleucids in Mesopotamia. The other Seleucus was one of Alexander's other generals, and they had the Mesopotamian records, but put their kingdom at tens of thousands of years old because of those long king reigns. And so Ptolemy's like, no,
stack them right after each other.
Yeah. So Ptolemy's like, no, we have the superior kingdom. We're older. And so these two, and it's politics. A lot of ancient history is politics. When you see a list of kings on a wall at Karnak in Egypt, you can't trust it, because once you realize they left off King Tut, they left off his father Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. They left off Queen Hatshepsut. It's like, why did they leave these people? Because they didn't like them. So it's not
But
real.
we know about those people. Like,
yeah,
those
we
are probably
do. That's right.
the most notable ones.
Yes, but they didn't want us to know about them.
Why?
Because it wasn't politically convenient to have a pharaoh who believed in only one god. Akhenaten can't have that. That questions the entire pharaonic system. So chisel his name off the wall, destroy his city, ignore that guy ever lived. And so how do we trust the rest?
And so you're saying, based off what you've mentioned about like Chinese dynasties, it's kind of happening all over, that when we independently study global history in school or at university, it's taking what we know, which was it was recorded chronologically, one after another. But if we look at it within context of what were the motives within that, if your motive is to seem all powerful, you're going to make it seem larger. You're going to exclude that one candidate that you maybe didn't like. If you lived at the time, it made sense. And realistically, it was probably like 500 years of history being built. But we look back and we're like, well, if each person was living to this age, then it must have been 10,000 years of reigning.
Yeah. And it's funny because the archaeologists know this problem and they're stuck. And the scientists know the problem, say, oh, we'll come into the rescue. We will put scientific dates on these artifacts. But the most common one they use is carbon dating. And carbon dating works great up till the time of Christ. But then when you get to about 500 BC, you're in the middle of what's called the Hallstatt disaster, named after a place in Austria, Hallstatt, where they've carbon dated all these layers, and hundreds of years of dates give you the same date. And we don't know what happened. Something, either the Earth's magnetic field weakened, or the sun was very active, or maybe a supernova blew up, or something happened where you've got centuries where you see it in the calibration curve. By the time you get to something like Jericho, about 1500 BC, the carbon date puts it 150 to 200 years older than the destruction layer. We know the Israelites destroyed Jericho. Everything in Jericho screams the Israelite story. The city that had a double wall that fell outwards except in one place, that would have been Rahab's house. The city was not plundered afterwards, which is bizarre. It was deliberately burned. All the stuff is in the ground, and no one lived there for 500 years. That is the biblical story. But the carbon date puts the destruction prior to when Joshua was there. But so which was right, the carbon date or historical date?
Oh boy. Why would it do that?
I honestly, I think it's because during the flood, we had lots of volcanism. Volcanoes are very low in carbon-14. We had lots of limestone formation. We completely turned over the carbon budget, if you would, of the Earth and restarted. Oh. And then carbon-14 started building up in the atmosphere, plus the Earth's magnetic field has been weakening, which slows down the protective, basically the Earth's magnetic field protects us from cosmic rays, but cosmic rays are the things that make carbon-14 in the atmosphere.
Oh, so it's just overall weakened over time. So the reading is just less accurate.
Not necessarily less accurate. It's just that if you go back in time, assuming the Earth's magnetic field was stronger, there would have been less carbon-14 in the atmosphere. Therefore, anything you date will have less carbon-14 than it should based on the modern amount. And so as you go closer to the flood, you get inflation of the carbon dates.
So we can't take this blanket carbon dating approach to history.
Nope.
There's way too many factors at play.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. That is so interesting.
Now apply those thoughts to the biblical question, how old the earth is.
I have no idea where you'd even begin. There's just too many factors.
There are too many. Exactly. There are too many factors. So carbon dating is a wonderful science with limitations. And the further back in time you go, the less certain you can be of its accuracy. That's the issue. And so we can't use that specific test to say, oh, this Egyptian pyramid was built at this particular time. Yeah, okay, you dated the wood in that pyramid. You don't actually know how old it is.
Interesting. So it sounds like basically, if I'm like taking into all the events that are happening, what we see in that biblical timeline of what's going on with the Israelites and like, kind of getting down to Jesus's birth, everything in the world is happening within that time period. It's not an isolated timeline that's existing outside of a larger global timeline.
No, it's the entire thing rolled into a biblical time frame. Yeah. It's funny because another way to think about it, today we have 8 billion people, but for about first 300,000 years or so, they say it was only about 1 million people. I say, okay, we can do some math here. 1 million people. The average generation time is probably, let's just call it 30 years to make it easy. So every 30 years, you have 1 million dead bodies. 300,000 years. Where are the billions of dead bodies? Where are the towns?
Decomposing, obviously.
Yeah, and they had symbolic representation. They buried their dead. And we do have some scattered remains here and there. But there should be so much evidence of human activity. It's just not there. It's as if the people never existed. So instead, let's just start with Shem, Ham, and Japheth and their 3 wives. Let's say we're 6 people. The flood was about 4,500 years ago. Can we get 8 billion people from 6 in only 4,500 years? That sounds hard, right?
Yeah.
It's not. All you have to do is double the population every 150 years.
Just like exponentially compound?
Yeah. So 150 years after the flood, there's 12 people. 300 years after the flood, there's 24 people. That's ridiculous. Of course there's more people than that. But by keeping the population growth incredibly low, you arrive at 8 billion people today with ease.
Interesting.
So the number of people in the world fits the biblical model really well. We just had to slow down population growth from war and starvation and disease to keep it so we only have 8 billion people. The numbers are on our side of the equation, and the archaeology, since there's no evidence of millions of people living in the past, it really does look biblical.
Remember when I said at the beginning of this episode, it's really hard to
Yes.
react at live time because somebody just drops a bomb on you? This is like me in real time right now. Where do you place it in the timeline? Is like, when did the dinosaurs happen? When did the Ice Age happen?
Dinosaurs are pre-flood.
Pre-flood.
The fossil record itself was caused by Noah's flood.
Okay. Not an asteroid.
Well, an asteroid might hit the Earth to start off the flood, or we might have gotten hit by asteroids during the flood. I mean, you look at the moon; it's obviously been hit by something. Question is when. So I don't know, that there was no asteroids, but no, it was not. It's not just the end of the Cretaceous where the supposed asteroid killed off the dinosaurs. It's the fossil record. We have 1,600 years between Adam and the flood, where lots of things can build up, like clamshells and crinoid discs and whatever on bottoms of shallow seas, and that all gets buried. And then after all the oceanic stuff gets buried, and dinosaurs and things like that get buried, the fossil record is a record of Noah's flood. So that's when the so-called dinosaurs happened. Now, whether or not they were on Noah's Ark, whether or not they lived with man afterwards, that's a whole nother subject for another day.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the fossil record. The Ice Age was caused by Noah's flood.
The Ice Age was caused by Noah's flood. You mean there was a flood that froze?
Nope. The after effects of the flood are exactly what you would want to have an ice age. You don't cool off the earth to get an ice age. You warm up the earth to get an ice age. During the flood, we have lots of volcanism happening. You have continents moving. You have warm oceans, which causes evaporation. But with with what we call catastrophic plate tectonics, not slow, fast as your fingernails grow plate tectonics, but about as fast as a person can walk plate tectonics, which is what the science is actually telling us.
Everything is floating like cereal and milk, like it is moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moving. But when the flood stops, what drains the waters off the continents? Well, the Bible says the mountains rose. So we have mountain forming. And if you look at the Alps, the Andes, the Rockies, the Himalayas, those are all geologically very young mountain chains. And it's weird. They post-date the dinosaurs. They're younger than the extinction of the dinosaurs in the evolutionary model. Why did the Earth all of a sudden start building mountains in weird places? Like the Rockies, the subduction zones is the edge of California. Why do the Rockies even exist? Plate tectonics does not explain where they are.
Oh my gosh.
But if you have a continental plate that gets pushed down, the first thing that's going to melt are the silicate materials. They're going to, in fact, the rock will stay there. The silicates will boil off once you start heating it up. That causes a specific type of volcano. It's called a shield volcano. The shield volcano is explosive and is dust, like Mount St. Helens. And poof, you have all this dust exploding into the air as these mountains are forming. Warm oceans, dust in the air reflects the sunlight. You have warm oceans and cold continents. The oceans are evaporating, coming down as rain, and far north and far south and high elevation coming down as snow. And so you get snow building up for several centuries. And then it stops and it starts melting. So the sea levels drop, and when they melt, they come back up again. So the current sea level is about 80 feet lower than it was right after the flood.
And that ice age is just from that snow for centuries.
Yeah. The snow building up as ice is draining the waters down, and it's building up lots of dust that creates an ice age. But the ice isn't universal. Just because it's an ice age doesn't mean the earth is frozen. There's still tropical rainforests. There's still coral reefs.
Yeah.
There's still temperate grasslands. It's just the polar regions kind of encroach on the others, and the temperate regions go south. But there's still a warm belt at the equator that doesn't change much at all.
Gosh, I'm trying to think of other events that I want to place, but I feel like those are my two big ones. Do you get common questions that you like to clarify?
Yeah, actually, it's the pyramids.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, if you take the secular date for the pyramids, they predate Noah's flood.
Okay.
They can't. They're built because they're built out of flood-derived limestones. Plus, they couldn't survive Noah's flood. You got a bunch of blocks that are just stacked up. You think of the surface area of one side of a pyramid, just stacked blocks, and this limestone's not very heavy. It's only 2.5 times heavier than water. So if you submerge it, now the buoyancy of the water means only 1.5 times heavier than water. It's not very heavy. And then even a 1 mile an hour current, could you imagine that the force, the pressure against that face, just a little bit of pressure on that huge surface area, the rocks are going to tumble over. So they can't survive the flood. And they're made of flood deposited limestone, so therefore they didn't survive the flood.
Because they came from after the flood.
Because after the flood. But that means that we have to condense Egyptian history a lot.
Yeah.
But it's the earlier stuff we have to condense, not the later stuff. Because
I see. So when do you think based on Noah's flood, how many years after did that community start becoming what is known as Egypt?
It would have happened pretty quickly.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to say 500 years after the flood. So Abrahamic time, sort of. That's probably when the pyramids of Giza were being built. Probably.
Oh, okay.
Not that Abraham ever saw the pyramids.
Right.
Because they're not close to the border with Israel.
Got it.
And they're really far away. But that's about the time frame. I love Egypt.
Amazing.
But if you just take the Egyptian timeline, straight up timeline, and the biblical timeline, no modifications, you say, okay, well, the Israelites were in Egypt. When? Well, that puts them in the second intermediate period. When Egypt is not controlled by the Egyptians. They're controlled by a group of people from Asia called the Hyksos. They're actually a Semitic people, just like the Israelites are Semitic people. They're controlling Egypt. And then all of a sudden you realize there's clues in the text, like when Joseph tells his dad, hey, tell Pharaoh that you're a shepherd because shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians. What? Why would I want to tell the Pharaoh that he should hate me? That makes no sense unless the Pharaoh's not an Egyptian. The Hyksos understood Semitic farming practices and things. He basically said, tell the Pharaoh that you're one of him. You're not Egyptian. Oh. You're like him. You speak a similar language and you're farmers and herdsmen.
So that wasn't to make him hate him. That's to make him like him.
Yeah. And so Pharaoh gives him the best of the land. He actually puts the Israelites on the eastern edge of the border as a buffer state between the raiders from the east and the Egyptians. So now he's protected.
Oh my gosh, this is the context I've been looking for. Pharaoh.
Egyptian history, we have the second intermediate period, which Joseph seems to fit in. But then a Pharaoh arises who does not know Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
That is, from the timeline, that would be the rise of the new kingdom, where Amhos conquers the Hyksos.
Okay. So
and now we have this is like the Valley of the Kings, the King Tut, that kind of stuff. We're not building pyramids anymore. We're building Valley of the Kings now in the new kingdom.
Got it.
So we have a different type of Egyptian culture now, and they don't like the Israelites. They don't like the Hebrews at all.
Got it.
And so we have a man named Moses, who is contemporary with like Amhos and Kamhos and Tutmosis, the first, second, and third. I mean, all these Oses in these words, and here we have Moses, and it's like that's the same name. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but he's contemporaneous with Hatshepsut, as if she was the princess that Moses' mother interacted with. I
feel like you're just like giving me such historical tea right now. Like, this is so juicy.
So you can't know that is the Pharaoh of the Exodus, right? You can't know it, but all the stuff links up. The time frame, it just links, and there's thing after thing after thing that just leaps out at you from the passages. Even like the Bible says that Joseph, so we're going back a couple hundred years here, Joseph rode in a chariot. Chariots did not exist in the Old Kingdom. The Hyksos brought in the chariot. Oh yeah, that puts Joseph in Hyksos time period again. There's dozens of correlations between the two stories.
And then Cleopatra would be
way
later.
Way later. Yeah. Cleopatra the Seventh is the last of the Ptolemaic pharaohs. Oh. She's like 30 BC or something like that. We're talking 1500 BC.
Okay.
Because the Exodus would have been 1446 BC.
So the timeline, how long is that from the early kingdom to Cleopatra-esque timeline? Is that 1,000 years then? Okay, it's like 1,500 years.
Maybe 2,000?
Okay.
Yeah, 1,500. Yeah, ish. Well, no, it's the Exodus is about 1,500 BC. So if Abraham lived about 2,000 BC, Moses lived about 1,500 BC, King David lived about 1,000 BC.
Those are big anchor points.
That's nice anchor points, nice round numbers, and literally King David's lifespan spanned 1,000 BC. And if the Exodus is 1446, then Moses lived about 1,500 BC. Nice round numbers that really help to put these things in our head. so we can anchor it down, lay out history, and understand how all the other things fit together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You're right. This might be a 3-day conversation. You've just brought so much clarity to the Word of God and just like making it edible and digestible and enjoyable today to the modern Christian. So this is what I needed.
We just started. There's so much more. It's a lifetime of study. That's what's in front of you. A lifetime of enjoying learning.
Okay. I'm going to find a way to bring you back on, and I don't even care about the schedule. We'll just chat, but this was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Carter, for all of your time and intelligence. I'll see you soon.
All right.